I do now want to bring in Jeremy Bash. He's a former chief of staff at the CIA and Pentagon and an NBC News contributor. Jeremy, thank you so much for sticking around this morning. Let me ask you to respond to what we have witnessed so far and, quite frankly, what we heard from the Iranian foreign minister. You heard the defiance there saying, why do this when the United States and Iran and regional partners were in the midst of diplomatic talks? What do you make of the timing of this massive military strike against Iran, Jeremy?
Well, ever since our data miner alerts have been popping off since about 1 a.m. Eastern, we've seen Iran's retaliation against these U.S. and Israeli coordinated strikes against Iranian territory. Look, I think several things make this different, Kristen. First of all, the size and scale of American military action is much larger than we've seen before from the Trump administration. The Maduro operation, Midnight Hammer, those were largely one and done. And this is an extensive, coordinated, probably multi-week campaign undertaken. Second is Iran has chosen to fire weapons around the region. And that's politically risky because it brings in the Emiratis, the Saudis, the Jordanians, the Iraqis, and other countries into this conflict. Third, the coordination between the United States and Israel is fairly unprecedented. We've never seen before the United States actually stationing F-22s and KC-46 tankers in Israel proper and having this attack be so clearly coordinated between Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump. And then finally, Kristen, I think the real difference here are the objectives. President Trump made very clear in his statement from Mar-a-Lago this morning that the objectives are to deprive the Iranians of having a ballistic missile program, to deprive them of having a nuclear enrichment capability, and fundamentally regime change. We've never had that overt statement from a United States president, which is we're using the military to engage in regime change in Iran. Unclear whether or not any of these actions will be able to come to fruition. We'll only have to see over the next several weeks how they unfold.
Jeremy, let me follow up with you on that point, because President Trump seemed to make the case that there would be this military offensive, this air military offensive launched by the United States and Israel. And then he had this message to the people of Iran that it is their moment to stand up, to depose the government. He said, basically, seize this moment. You might not get another one. And he was asked, the Iranian foreign minister, by Peter and Laura, if the Iranian government was effectively still intact. The top officials, he said, to the best of his knowledge, yes, they were. Just how challenging is that from an operational standpoint for the Iranian people, the Iranian military guard, to, at this point, effectively rise up against the government there? Is that a realistic ask by President Trump?
Well, assuming the United States and Israel have pristine intelligence, we probably could launch a decapitation strike, and so could Israel, against Iranian leaders. And the foreign minister said on your air just a little while ago that the Ayatollah is alive, as far as I know, which wasn't exactly a vote of confidence. But even if those leaders are taken out, that doesn't actually mean that regime change will necessarily follow, because, of course, you can change the regime, but what comes in its place? There'll be IRGC elements vying to take power. There'll be other militias trying to take power. Other regional players will want to go in there. And unless the United States is engaged in boots on the ground, and I don't foresee that at all, it's going to be very hard to just let the Iranian people take over and have democracy flourish. So I think the United States is going to have a strategy if it truly wants regime change in Iran.
And to that point, we did just see regime change in Venezuela, Jeremy. This is a completely different ballgame. Is it fair to say that? It is far more complicated to bring about regime change in a country like Iran.
Yep, and Maduro's deputy, Delcy Rodriguez, is still in charge in Venezuela, so I'm not even sure I'd call that regime change.
Okay, important point. And as always, we appreciate your perspective and your insight. Jeremy Bash, thank you so much for being here this morning. I now